In 1936, in the beautiful city of Oran, Algeria, a boy named Yves Saint Laurent was born. Nobody could have imagined that this quiet and sensitive child would one day become one of the most influential fashion designers in the world. From a very young age, Yves was fascinated by clothing, color, shaping, fashion designing. While other children busy playing games, Yves often found himself drawing. He would create little paper dolls and design clothes for them. He imagined dresses, jackets, coats, and entire collections. For Eve, drawing clothing was not simply a hobby, it was a way of expressing his imagination. His family noticed his talent and they encouraged him to continue drawing. As he grew older, Eve became increasingly interested in fashion. He began studying fashion illustration and learning about famous designers. At that time, the fashion world was dominated by established names, and becoming a successful designer seemed almost impossible for a young boy from Algeria. But Eve had something powerful on his side. He had talent, and even more importantly, he had a dream. As a teenager, Eve realized that Paris was the place where his dream could become reality. Paris was the center of haute couture. It was a city filled with dreams, fashion houses, talents, designers, wealthy clients, photographers, and artists. Eve entered a fashion design competition organized by International Wool Secretariat. His design impressed the judges. He won a prize and attracted attention in the fashion industry. This achievement gave the young designer confidence. Soon, Eve moved to Paris. He was still very young, but he was determined to learn everything he could. He began working at one of the most important fashion houses in the world, Dior. Christian Dior was already one of the biggest names in fashion. His design had transformed women's fashion after World War II. For Yves Saint Laurent, joining Dior's fashion house was like entering a dream. He was surrounded by experienced designers and craftsmen. Instead of being frightened, he watched carefully. He studied how collections were created, he learned how fabrics were selected, and how clothes were constructed. He learned how a fashion house worked. Christian Dior quickly recognized Eve's extraordinary talent. Although Eve was extremely young, Dior trusted his creativity and abilities. Eve began contributing designs to the house. His career was moving forward incredibly quickly, but then something unexpected happened. In 1957, Christian Dior suddenly died. The fashion world was shocked. Dior's company now faced a huge problem. Who would lead the fashion house? Many people expected an experienced designer to take control. Instead, the responsibility went to a 21-year-old Yves Saint Laurent. It, want, it was the enormous challenge. Imagine being only 21-year-old and suddenly being asked to lead one of the most famous fashion houses in the world. Accepted the responsibility. He created his first major collection for Dior. The collection was received very positively. The young designer had proved that he was not simply talented, he could lead and create. He could surprise the fashion world. Success, however, came with enormous pressure. Yi was still extremely young. The fashion industry demanded constant creativity. Every season required new designs. Every collection had to impress critics, clients, and journalists. At the same time, Eve was trying to understand who he was as a designer. Eventually, he was called into military service in France. The experience was extremely difficult for him, and his time away from Dior changed everything. When he returned, he discovered that he was no longer in charge of a fashion house. Eve was devastated. The company had chosen another designer for someone who had already achieved so much at such a young age. Losing his position was a painful turning point, but sometimes the end of a chapter becomes the beginning of another. Yves Saint Laurent decided not to give up. He wanted to build something of his own. With support of his close friend and business partner, Pierre Berger, Yves Saint Laurent began planning a new fashion house. In 1961, the Yves Saint Laurent fashion house was officially established. This was the beginning of one of the most famous names in the fashion history. Yves was no longer designing for someone else. Now he could follow his own vision. He wanted fashion to be elegant, but he also wanted it to be modern. He wanted women to feel confident and independent, and he wanted clothing to reflect the changing world around him. In 1960s were The 1960s were a period of enormous social and cultural change. Young people were questioning old traditions, music was changing, art was changing, women's roles were changing. Fashion needed to change too. Yves Saint Laurent understood this. He believed fashion should not simply tell women how they were expected to look, fashion could help women express who they were. He began introducing designs that challenged traditional ideas about women. One of his most famous contributions was the women's tuxedo, known as Lee smoking. A tuxedo had traditionally been associated with men. Eves transformed the concept for women. The result was elegant, powerful, and modern. It became one of the defining designs associated with his name. Yves Saint Laurent was deeply inspired by art. He admired painters and artists from different periods. He understood that fashion and art could influence each other. One of his most famous collection He understood that fashion and art could influence each other. One of his famous collections was inspired by work of Dutch artist Piet Mondrian. Yves transformed Mondrian's geometric style into clothing. Simple blocks and lines became striking dresses. The designs became instantly recognizable. They showed another side of Yves Saint Laurent. He did not think of fashion simply as making clothes. He saw fashion as a form of creative expression. A dress could be influenced by a painting, a jacket could reflect a cultural movement, a collection could tell a story. Yves also looked beyond Europe for inspiration. He was fascinated by different cultures, traditions, colors, and artistic styles. His collection sometimes reflected influence from Africa, Asia, Russia, Morocco, Spain, and other parts of the world. His love for Morocco became particularly important. He spent considerable time there and found inspiration in its landscapes, colors, architecture, and atmosphere. The bright colors and rich visuals culture influenced many of his later creations. Eve understood something important. The world was becoming more connected. Fashion could celebrate that diversity. Another important step in Yves Saint Laurent's career was his decision to make fashion more accessible. Traditional haute couture was extremely exclusive. Clothing was carefully created for individual clients and was available only into a smaller number of people. He wanted to bring his ideas to wider audience. He opened Saint Laurent Rive, Gauche, and Ready to Wear line. This was revolutionary. Fashion could still be stylish and creative without being completely inaccessible. Young people could experience the Saint Laurent aesthetic in a different way. The brand became associated with modernity, freedom, and youth. Yves Saint Laurent continued experimenting. He introduced designs inspired by menswear. He popularized trousers and tailored clothing for women. He created elegant jackets, coats, evening dresses, and other pieces that became influential. His approach changed the way many people thought about women's fashion. He showed that femininity did not have to mean wearing the traditional dresses. A woman could wear trousers, tuxedos, tailored jackets. She could choose clothing that made her feel strong and confident. For Eve, elegance and freedom could exist together. During the 1970s and 80s, Yves Saint Laurent became a major international fashion name. The brand expanded beyond clothing. Perfumes, cosmetics, accessories, and other products helped make the name recognizable around the world. One particularly famous fragrance was Opium, introduced in 1977. The brand advertising was bold and memorable. Yves Saint Laurent had successfully transformed his name into a global luxury brand, but behind success was still the same artist who had loved drawing clothes as a child. Being famous did not make life easy. Yves Saint Laurent was a deeply creative person, but he also struggled with the enormous pressure that came with his career. Fashion demanded constant innovation. People expected every collection to be extraordinary. Critics watched every move. The public expected perfection. Yves sometimes found it difficult to deal with the pressure. His close relationship with Pierre Berger played an important role in his professional life. Berg helped manage the business side of the fashion house while Yves focused on creativity. The partnership became one of the most important relationships in the history of brand. One reason Yves Saint Laurent became influential was his ability to make simple ideas powerful. A black jacket became iconic, a tuxedo could become a symbol of confidence, a simple silhouette could communication elegance. He understood that great fashion did not always require excessive decoration. Sometimes the strongest statement was simplicity. His work helped establish the idea of modern luxury could be both sophisticated and practical. After decades in fashion, Yves Saint Laurent gradually became tired of the constant pressure. The fashion industry was changing, new designers were appearing, business was becoming increasingly important. Fashion shows were becoming larger and more commercial. Yves, however, remained an artist at heart. In 2002, after more than 4 decades in the fashion world, Yves Saint Laurent officially retired. A farewell show in Paris celebrated his extraordinary career. It was an emotional moment. The young boy who once drew clothes in Algeria had become one of the greatest fashion designers of the 20th century. Yves Saint Laurent died in 2008 in Paris, but his influence did not disappear. His ideas continued to influence designers around the world. His fashion house remained major luxury brand. His designs became part of fashion industry. Museums display his work. Fashion students study his collection. It became a symbol of creativity. Yves Saint Laurent did not simply follow fashion, he helped change it. He understood that society was changing and allows those changes to enter his designs. He believed women could be elegant without sacrificing freedom. He believed clothing could be inspired by art. He believed fashion could be modern and accessible. Talent alone does not guarantee an easy journey. Yves Saint Laurent extraordinary success, but he also experienced rejection, pressure, uncertainty, and difficult moments. Yet he continued creating. Pencil to a fashion legend. Think back to the young Eve in Algeria. He was just a boy with a paper and a pencil. He did not own a famous fashion company. He did not have an international reputation. He did not have a future to know what the future would bring. The simple habit became the foundation of an extraordinary career. He kept drawing. Eventually, his drawings became dresses, his ideas became collection, his name became a global brand, and his vision changed the way the world thought about fashion. The story of Yves Saint Laurent is not only a story about luxury clothing, it is also a story about believing in your creativity. Sometimes people may see your interest as unusual, sometimes they may not understand your dreams, sometimes success may come very quickly, followed by unexpected difficulties. But creativity required courage. Yves Saint Laurent did not become famous because of he simply copied what everyone else was doing. He became famous because he developed his own vision. He looked at the world differently, and then he turned what he saw into something new. Once dreamed of creating beautiful clothes. That dream eventually took him from Algeria to Paris. From a young fashion student, he became a designer at Dior. From Dior, he built his own fashion house. From his own fashion house, he changed the global fashion industry. His dream reminds us that great achievements often begin with something very small: a drawing, an idea, a dream, and the courage to keep working on it. Yves Saint Laurent's career changed fashion forever. He challenged traditional ideas, he brought art into clothing, he made women's fashion more powerful than modern, he connected different cultures with fashion, and he created designs that remained influential long after they first appeared. Today, when people hear the name Yves Saint Laurent, they did not simply think of clothes, they think of creativity, elegance, confidence, art, and innovation. The boy who once sat drawing clothes had become a legend, and his greatest lesson may be the simplest one. Never underestimate a small dream when someone is willing to work.